Many more to come. Joining us now is our friend Judy Miller from the Manhattan Institute. And Judy, welcome.
Hi, how are you, Steve?
How's your summer going?
Busy.
It's almost over. Yeah, busy is right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of that is attributable to what's going on in Egypt.
Right,
Okay.
absolutely.
You and I haven't talked about this in quite a while, and of course, in the past week or so, the whole landscape has changed. Today, we find out that Mubarak is going to be released from prison in a couple of weeks, and today or over the weekend, we find out the burning of the churches, the slaughter of the Christians, the marking with red paint of these facilities before they were attacked, which is just brings back all kinds of horrific historical analogies and comparisons to what was done to the Jews in Germany. Where is this country now?
Well, this country is basically its future is being determined by what's happening in the streets, by the struggle between the Muslim Brotherhood supporters and the military and their civilian allies. The future of Egypt is very much in play right now. And the administration, which of course I knew you were going to ask, so I'm going to get ahead of you here.
I was good. Yeah, you know what I was going to. How much of responsibility do they bear?
Well, I think that we shouldn't fall into what I call the Egyptian pattern, which is to blame the United States for all of its ills. And by the way, both sides of this struggle do that. We either are accused of having supported President Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood candidate, too much, or we're accused of not supporting him enough when 30 million Egyptians go into the streets and sign petitions saying this man is destroying democracy. So the point is we have very limited leverage here in this situation, and anything we say at this point is not likely to be helpful, and I'm very pleased that the administration tried to do something to secure an agreement. That effort failed, and now the grim truth is that this is a struggle that the Egyptians are going to have to wage, and that whose outcome will be determined by them.
But of course, back to where we are. I mean, we have a State Department that, and an administration that won't call it a coup. That said they don't have to. They've determined. This was almost a direct quote. We've determined that we don't have to make a determination on what it was, or on what it's called, and of course, as you know, when Obama sent McCain and Lindsey Graham there, it was to reach out to try to get to the Muslim Brotherhood back involved, and they've openly said they want the Muslim Brotherhood back involved in any kind of a compromise or any kind of new elections, and meanwhile, the Muslim Brotherhood is doing what I think most people would expect them to do, or the Egyptian government is rather, and that's arresting them, outlawing them, and getting rid of them, and hopefully banning them, because they're anti-American, they're anti-Israel, they're anti-Christian, they're anti-Semitic. They have they're the antithesis of democracy, and this administration's in love with them.
I don't think that's true. I know this is going to surprise you, but I actually think the administration's policy so far, if your standard is do no harm, has been pretty good, and I'll tell you why. It took a lot of foresight and I think a sense of where American strategic interest lies to take the position that we didn't have to declare this a coup. I mean, let's face it, of course it's a coup, right? You know it's a coup, I know it's a coup, but it wouldn't be helpful to cut off money to the group that has done so much to advance American interests in the region and upon whom American forces depend for movement, a bulwark of the support for Arab-Israeli peace, and I'm talking about the Egyptian military. It would not enhance our leverage to cut off aid to the one group that's making most of the decisions now on one side of this fight. So I think that was the correct decision. I think canceling the military exercises known as Bright Star, and by the way, Steve, I used to cover those exercises.
Really?
So I know
Wow.
about them, yeah. We haven't had those exercises since 2009. So it was a symbol, and it sent a signal to the generals. But meantime, we were working behind the scenes to try and get the Muslim Brotherhood and the military to do a deal. That effort failed, but it was the right thing to do, and it's right not to declare them a coup so that you can continue to have some modest leverage in this fight, and to understand that our influence and our impact is going to be limited. There's just not very much we can do now. We have to stand back and see how this struggle plays out.
And how do you think this struggle is going to play out, and how long do you think it's going to take for this struggle to play out?
Well, I have great faith in the Egyptian people. I mean, I've been going to that country since the early 1970s, and I was based there for the New York Times in the mid-'80s. I watched Mubarak crack down on the Brotherhood when it became clear that they were supporting terrorism and blowing up ministers and officials in the streets, even though they said that they had renounced violence. I think that if the Muslim Brotherhood doesn't make a deal with the military, the military will move to crush them with the overwhelming support of most Egyptians. I do not think that's a good outcome. I think, by the way, that some Islamist participation is very essential if the views of a large percentage of Egyptians are to be represented in a democratic government. But I think that the Islamists do not need to be the Brotherhood. They could be the Salafists, who are a group which is doctrinaire in terms of doctrine, even more pure, more Islamic than the Muslim Brotherhood. But they have in the beginning they supported the military crackdown. So, in other words, you don't have to have participation of the Islamists to include those who favor a larger role for Islamists and Islamism in Egypt. But I think, I think that I think the military will move to crush them, and I think they will be successful. I worry about them driving the Brotherhood underground and back into terror. That's what my big concern.
Yeah, okay, so that's why you think it would, because I was wondering why you said it would be a mistake when you admitted that there could be other Islamic influences and other Islamic representatives in that government, not the Brotherhood, but you just basically answered it because you don't want them to go underground and then and then start blowing people up as a terrorist group. But
absolutely.
But when they were included in the process, you saw the results. So how do you tame a group like that?
Well, Steve, all we've seen is that when they're ruling, they tend to exclude the views and the participation of anybody else who disagrees with them. So what has been determined by the Egyptian people, not by the United States, is that they are not fit to govern and that they are not democratic and that Egyptians don't want them. Now, would I have been happier, would you have been happier if that had been determined by an election? Absolutely. But it was the feeling of most Egyptians. I was there in April. And most Egyptians said that I talked to said the army must move because we are never going to have another election. They will consolidate power. We will never get a chance to get rid of them. That's why we've had what we've had this summer. So I think that my hope is still that the more pragmatic members of the Brotherhood will realize that Egyptians don't want what they were peddling and will make a deal with the government, and that Egyptians will come together to move along with the roadmap that had been devised for Egypt's very slow and painful transition to democracy.
One more for you, Judy Miller of the Manhattan Institute. Why would the Army make a deal with the Brotherhood at this point? Why would they trust them? Why would they make a deal with them? For what purpose?
Well, I don't to avoid driving them underground, as we've discussed, but also because it doesn't mean that they can participate in government without dominating government. I mean, their voice can be heard, and on some issues they may win, and on other issues they're likely to lose, but they can still participate in government and learn what democracy is all about, which is not, imposing edicts, as President Morsi did, saying that, I can overrule any law that's enacted by the parliament. That was one thing he did, for example, that was completely anti-democratic, and the Obama administration said very little about it, moves like that. So, you can let them participate, and they have to learn what being a Democrat is all about, which is winning some and losing some struggles.
Well, see, where you and I disagree probably is that I don't think I don't think you could teach, pardon the expression, an old dog new tricks. I don't think they have. I don't think they have any interest in that. And I stick by my previous assessment of the Muslim Brotherhood. They're, just on the basis of what Morsi said in the past about Jews and what they're doing now in their slaughtering of Christians and blowing up churches. I have no use for a group like that. I don't want them in my government if I'm Egypt. I don't want them anywhere. Drive them the heck out of the country, not underground. And
well, there were several Muslim Brotherhood members whom I spoke to, and people who were even spokesmen who shared your horror and my horror at such statements. And I think that the best thing that could happen would be that the Brotherhood would split at this point, and that the people who were more active in the party, the Freedom and Justice Party, would actually come to the forefront and make the kind of deal that I'm recommending. I think that you have to separate out those people who don't want to play by democratic rules and say,
right.
No, you can't play. But anybody who's willing to play should be able to play, whether or not they call themselves a Muslim Brotherhood or whether or not they call themselves a Salafist. But as long as they respect democratic rules and procedures, I think they ought to be permitted to participate, that it's in everyone's interest that they do so. But we can't determine that. Egyptians have to determine that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, Judy, a pleasure talking to you as always. Thank you very much.
Good talking to you, Steve.
Bye-bye.
We'll
Take care.
watch with interest.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, every day. All right, Judy Miller, ladies and gentlemen.